Hello everybody, welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back with an interesting video. I'm here to continue my Pathfinder Phase 1, Block 1, Module 3. I'm here to talk about kit mentality over the centuries. Now, the first thing that the exercise says, I need to research the kits that were carried by Oetzi the Iceman and an 18th century long hunter and George Washington Sears or Nesmith, and I need to log the similarities and remember the redundancies. Now I've got my book here because I had to do some research and I had to write down some information. Now, first thing I want to say is I really liked this assignment. I really liked the researching of especially Oetzi the Iceman. This is a body that they found in the Italian Alps that they thought was just a dead hiker, and they brought the body in, and come to find out the body had been mummified naturally because it was face down in the ice. The guy had fell down, it looked like, and he had his left arm like this, and he had his right hand back like this, and he was laying down on his arm. After all the forensics science involved, they found that this guy had been dead for over 5,300 years. Folks, that's a long time. That's before the pyramids. That Oetzi the Iceman was ancient, and a lot of people suspect that he was the oldest, most well-preserved mummy ever. Now, I don't know, but on his body, I have it written down because I took a lot of notes here. They had, in no particular order, he had a longbow, which wasn't finished. He had a quiver of arrows. There was 14 arrows, but only 2 of them were finished. The other 12 were just shafts. He had a flint knife. He had a piece of flint that was laid into a piece of wood, and it was lashed using some sinew, I guess, and then it was sealed with some sort of resin, maybe some tar or pine or something, pitch or something, some sort of resin. So he had a knife, a flint knife. And the thing that surprised me the most about Oetzi was he had a copper axe. Now, this is a time period, I think it was 3300 BC or something like that. This is a time before we even knew copper existed. And so for a man to be yielding around a copper axe in that point of time would have meant that this guy is of high stature. He is somebody important. Another thing that he had was he had a birch bark container, and in that container he had some maple leaves wrapped around some sort of coals. Like, to me, I'm kind of under the assumption that he might have been transporting fire from one location to another by wrapping it in those birch leaves. So he had a container. He had a fur hat. He had cordage. He had fire-making implements. He had a cloak. So he had clothing. He had, which could be considered cover. Again, he had a hat that was made out of fur, which keeps radiation in your body. And again, that could be considered a cover. So Oetzi the Iceman, there was a lot of things that unfolded with that whole story. You know, forensic science, those guys, this mummy is over 5,300 years old, and they were able to talk about things that just blew me away. In fact, Oetzi the Iceman could be a completely separate video because I don't want to get too long-winded on this. I want to get to the point, to the exercise, and mainly talk about the things that he had with him. Again, he had a knife, so he had his cutting tool. If you look at the 10 C's, What did he have? He had a knife. Yeah, he had a combustion device. He had fire making ability. He had cover, because he had some cordage that he made like clothing out of natural grasses. He had shoes that were made out of cordage and natural grasses and materials that he had shoes. So he had 3, and then he had a container. That's the 4th C, and then he had cordage. He had the 5 C's. Oetzi the Iceman. This guy just blows me away. The amount of things that he had way back when. Before the pyramids. Let's remind ourselves, folks, before the pyramids, he had those 5 C's. It just blows me away. Now let's talk about the 18th century long hunters. They carried a lot of items. They carried fixed blade knives. They also carried folding blade knives. They had flint and steel. They had flintlock rifles. They also had char cloth. And what they would do is they would put the char cloth in the pan on the flintlock, and the flint would hit they'd pull the hammer back on their rifles. They'd pull the trigger, and the flint would hit the steel, and it'd throw the spark on their char cloth. And so they would use their rifles as an implement to start fire by igniting their char cloth. I thought that was really neat. They had an axe. They carried axes. They had covers, and they also had tarps and covers of that nature as well. They had cordage. They had containers. They had wool blankets, wool caps, cotton shirts, and a lot of the knives that they carried that were most common from my research was butcher knives. That was a big thing for them. They carried comb for their hair, moccasins. They had leggings. They carried greased deer skins. So there's your cover again. They had thread and needles. They had mittens and all breech cloth to clean their rifles. Bear skin. They had 1/2 pound of gunpowder, 1 pound of lead balls, 1 pound of tobacco. They had tarps and cook pots. And the neat thing about the 18th century long hunters is a lot of their implements were distributed amongst a few men. Like they'd have 4 men would get 1 cook set or something like that. So again, if you look at the 18th century long hunters, they had the 5 C's. Again, they had a cutting tool. They had combustion in their flint and steel. They had cover. They had, again, the cover was, they had bear skin. They had, greased deer skins. They had tarps. So they had cover. They had their containers. And then they had cordage. So that was a little bit of research on the 18th century long hunters. They had the 5 C's. Now let's talk about George Washington Sears, or Nesmith. Nesmith carried what he referred to as a ditty bag. His ditty bag, he had hooks, fish hooks. He had a canoe, obviously. He had cordage with them. He had needles. He had buttons. He had yarn. He had beeswax, which could have been used for candle making or things like that. He had shoe wax. He carried a file. He had matches. He carried medicine. He had a compass. He had a canvas backpack. He had a blanket, a tent, a hatchet. Now he was very well known for having a folding knife that had 2 blades on it, and then he also had a hatchet. He was very well known for that. He had tinware. He had clothing. He had 2 days worth of rations for food. He had clothing, obviously. He had a wool shirt, wool drawers, wool socks, wool coat, wool vest, wool pants. Everything that he wore, almost for the lack of a better description, was made out of wool. He had a 5 foot by 7 foot wool blanket. Tarps, he had a 6 foot by 8 foot tarp made out of cotton. He had a 9 foot by 7 inch tarp, and they were both waterproof. He had a pillow bag, kind of like a browse bag, but it was a pillow, and he'd fill it with leaves and things like that, and he'd use it to lay his head on for comfort, and it would also break conduction to prevent heat loss. He had a canoe. He had a muzzle loading rifle. He had a 2-quart kettle, a double hatchet. Again, and he had, I mentioned that earlier, he had a double hatchet, and then he had a fixed blade knife that had 2 blades on it. And again, you know, he also had the 5 C's. He had, again, let's go back. He had a cutting tool. He had a combustion device. He had cover. He had containers, cordage. He had the 5 C's. Now, so it says here as part of the exercise that I need to list the common pieces carried by these 3 different examples. And it's simple to me. They all had the 5 C's. It says here, in your own words, describe why they all carried the same items. I honestly believe that all 5 of those items, the 5 C's, I think they carried them because those are the most important things necessary to sustain life in a survival situation. And living, you know, when you're separated by so many centuries of time, and geographically they're from complete polar ends of the earth. You know, Oetzi was found in the Italian Alps, and they named him Oetzi based on the name of the mountain range that they found his body. All of these 5 items were, you know, to sustain human life. I mean, we have to breathe oxygen. We have to be warm. We need hydration. We don't want to hydrate incorrectly, otherwise we'll get giardia or crypto and dehydrate even more. You know, a knife is very useful to process meat. So we need these items to survive, you know, to sustain. And I think that this homework assignment was so unique. I think it was so neat. I really enjoyed it. And it makes me wonder if that's where Dave come up with the idea of the 5 C's, you know, as he was researching this in his development of his Pathfinder School and that whole system, Self-Reliance Outfitters. It really makes me wonder, you know. I just think that this whole thing, you know, these people separated by so much time and so many different lifestyles, they had the same items. You know, it was just very interesting to me. And it's funny because before I started this course, I carried the 5 C's, not even knowing it, you know, but those were the items that were important to me. You know, I needed a container, I needed to make fire, I needed a knife to cut, and I needed cordage, and, you know, I had my 5 C's even before I knew what the 5 C's were. It's just a man and a woman and human beings for that nature need these things to live. I don't know how else to put it. So folks, I want to say thank you for watching the video today. Please feel free to leave comments down below. Feel free to like this video, share this video, and if you like the content that you see on my channel, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. And until next time, have a beautiful day. We'll see you in Block 2, Module 1. We'll be talking about personal space. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.